Hey, what's going on, everybody? Welcome back to Broku no Hero. Today, this is a very different kind of video, and this is the Surrounding Darkness lore explained. You may be wondering, I've never heard of the series Surrounding Darkness. What is it? Well, guys, it's one of the projects I've been talking about. I am writing a book. This book will be called The Surrounding Darkness. Well, I mean, the title could change in the future, but we will see. This is a book where I've had this story in my head for many years, and honestly it started off when I was a little kid and I had an Anakin Skywalker action figure and an Aragorn action figure as well. These toys, paired with my imagination, I combined the worlds of Star Wars and Middle-earth. Aragorn joining the Jedi and the elves teaching Anakin and Obi-Wan of their amazing magic power. And, I've always loved to write, which is why my other channel, Broku72, was a channel mainly about fan fiction turned into what-if theory. And it seemed people loved my stories, so I've always wanted to do something of my own. Like, purely, my own story, not putting Anakin and Aragorn into a combined mythos of Star Wars and Middle-earth. While I thought of many ideas, my recent tastes of fiction have given me enough inspiration to craft a story in this world. Starting with my old imaginative worlds of Middle-earth plus Star Wars and a galaxy far away, and recently being obsessed with Black Clover and Game of Thrones. I absorbed all of these into my inspiration for my new story, of course with a lot of Norse mythology influences sprinkled on top of it. This is Surrounding Darkness, a story of many races, gods, heroes, beasts, and vast amounts of magic in a sort of fantasy sci-fi style galaxy. I've been world building crafting for this story for several months, and have been writing for a bit now. I'm just only a few chapters in, and yeah, it will take a while for the book to be officially done. But I want to make this video to either 1, build hype for the story, and I hope you guys will like the idea, or 2, you guys can critique the shit out of me and say it's a dumb-ass idea, and then I can just work on my other ideas, because believe me, I actually have many story ideas, or I spend a lot of time with those stories in my head as well, crafting and writing. So, if you go to a bookstore and you look at the back of the book, and you get a somewhat summary of what the story is, well, basically this is what this video is going to be, but on performance-enhancing drugs. I'm going to give you a bit of an explanation of the lore of the universe, its history, and more. And of course, what I'm going to tell you now, it's not exactly 100% of what really happens or what really is. Because when I'm talking about the story in the book, there's the background continuity of different characters sharing their stories of what they think happened and what they know happened. And that's going to change based on which character is telling the story or learning of the history of the world. Similar to how in Black Clover, we had many different explanations of what happened many years ago with the elves. Noel thought they were demons. And then there's the ancient demon god. We didn't really know. We had a vague idea, and that's kind of what this story is. But it took a while to get that full story in Black Clover, so this is a gross summarization, with the accuracy of the info being similar to the accuracy of information of hearing something from a friend of a friend. With that being said, I think we should just get into this. I'm going to give you a bit of a teaser of the world of Surrounding Darkness. I want you to know that a lot of these images are not, art for this series. I'm using these as placeholder images, but when I do get more into the story, I will hire professional artists to create art for, character designs and art of the world and book cover, blah, 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 blah. Millions of years ago, the universe formed around a giant void. At opposite-sized, 2 star-sized planets slowly drifted into the center of this void. One day, they collided. These planets were known as Muspelheim, the planet of fire, and Niflheim, the planet of ice. As the 2 giant cosmic entities collided, the melting ice mixed with the hot fire. After years and years of them mixing, came into creation the first Jotun, Ymir. Ymir was an asexual being and gained sustenance from licking the ice, melting into salt, and the salt nourishing him. As the salt nourished him, he grew and grew into a bigger and bigger being, filling the void over time. As Ymir grew, more Jotnar came into existence, being born through his sweat, blood, and tears. Ymir, growing bored with his overwhelming power, would lick the ice into shapes of statues that would look like man. And one day, his descendants, trying to mess with their ancestor, would destroy these statues, breaking them off from the ground and launching them into the depths of space. These statues would drift for years and years and years, while the Jotnar would continue to grow in numbers. But one day, these statues would drift into the depths of a cosmic storm of pure mana, and the mana poured life energy into these statues of ice, creating the gods. The first god was Buri. These few dozen statues would turn into living entities, looking similar to that of man, of humans of our world, but taller, bigger, stronger, and filled with vast amounts of magic power. And one day, they would return to the void and set up a tribe where Buri was named the chief of the god tribe. Buri was the strongest with his amazing magical power. Although there was only a few dozen at first, within several hundred years, the gods grew rapidly, as there are now tens of thousands of them, and the Jotnar grew scared, the gods reproducing far faster than the Jotnar. And, on average, the gods were more powerful than the Jotnar themselves, as despite the Jotnar having amassing physical strength and the ability to manipulate the natural elements of the world, they would be overpowered by gods. With this fear, the Jotnar started a war, hoping to remain the dominant species in their galaxy. Ymir stayed neutral in this war, as it wasn't something that he admired. He did not like conflict. The conflict lasted many millennia, with great casualties and destruction. The position of chief among the gods would eventually fall to Bor, the son of Buri, and when Bor grew old, he passed the title down to his son, Odin, who was half god and even half Jotun himself. Odin encompassed the amazing strength and elemental manipulation of the Jotnar, as well as the amazing magical power of the gods. Odin named his two younger brothers, Vili and Ve, his commanders, and the gods had raised their greatest successes with Odin as chief. But still, many millennia passed and the war raged on. Odin, with his nigh infinite wisdom, developed a plan. They took the galaxy-sized Jotun, Ymir, off guard, combining their magic power and creating a large blade, large enough to slit his throat. The gushing blood of Ymir not only ended his life, but caused a mass flood that drowned all of the remaining Jotnar. The war was finally over, and the gods reigned as the supreme beings in the galaxy. Odin and his brothers used the remains of Ymir to craft many planets, realms, stars, and races and beasts. The galaxy was renamed from the Void to Ymirgardr, in honor of what was actually Odin's and his brother's grandfather. The gods lived in a time of antiquity, living in luxury and pleasure, spreading their power and divinations across their galaxy. But one day, Odin would sense a dark presence in the surrounding galaxies, and send his brothers to investigate. Only one returning, Vili, who died in Odin's arms. Before he passed on, he warned his brethren of the darkness surrounding the galaxy and it closing in. Not even the great power of the gods could stop it. With his brother and people in mind, Odin dedicated the rest of his life to gain knowledge of the surrounding darkness, and to gain power to stop it. Odin drank from the well of knowledge, and learned cedar magic from his witch wife. Fate magic, paired with nigh infinite wisdom, was still not enough to stop the darkness. The wise god thus crafted a plan to stop the darkness, and started to create a grand army. Using his own blood, Odin resurrected the Jotun clan. With his magic, he separated parts of himself, his magic power personified into the elves, his wisdom and craftiness personified into the dwarves, and his thirst for power and love personified into man. The elves were masters of magic, born with high amounts of mana, and were godlike in nature. The dwarves were born with less mana, but their minds could create powerful, unrivaled weapons and items. The Jotnar didn't possess any mana, but kept their original powers upon resurrection, and were small in numbers. Man were the weakest of the four races in individual terms, but made up for it in very large numbers. They couldn't use mana within themselves, but could harness nature's mana and forge it into weapons and armor, although their craftsmanship was many times lesser than that of the dwarves. In the Grand Army, the men were to be the foot soldiers, the Jotnar the berserkers, the dwarves the weapon masters, and the elves the commanders. Odin then created 4 quadrants of the galaxy for each race. The elves were sent to Alfheim, the dwarves to Nidavellir, the Jotnar to Jotunheim, and man to Midgard. Odin let the great races develop on their own, hoping for them to flourish into powerful organizations and to expand their influence across their quadrant. For many thousands of years, the dwarves and elves advanced the fastest, colonizing much of their quadrant. The Jotnar had the ability to do so as well, but were isolationists in nature, so they remained on their first homeworld. Man had progressed much slower. Many tribes and kingdoms divided the people, and thus divided their potential and power. Man had been sent to 2 planets by Odin, and had only expanded to 1 other planet by accident, via a magic portal. Thus, 3 planets were dominated by the 3 main kingdoms, Christia, Muslia, and Scandia. Every few years, the 4 races would gather for a council, each time man being ridiculed by their fellow races. Man was the only race divided. Then one day, a blessing came to Odin and his grand plans. One of his sons were born, and his son emitted light so bright that one needed to use magic to protect their eyes to even look upon the newborn baby. Odin's son was the god of light. He quickly began to see his son as a weapon in the war against darkness, as not only could he manipulate pure light magic, but he was impervious to all types of damage, including the darkness itself. The god of light, Baldur, grew into one of the most powerful of the gods, rivaling even Thor. The god of light had spent his time among the races, learning of their cultures and their ways. He noticed the elves were full of themselves, thinking them superior and even as gods in their own right. The dwarves were always too busy gathering materials and working in their caves and shops, and the Jotuns preferred a life of isolation, interacting with only family and close friends. Thus, man was the most open to the god of light. Man grew excited with his displays of power, even one day Baldur saving a village from a pack of dark dragons. Cults spread, following the god of light as the one true god. Thus, they abandoned the old gods, but still, the old gods was the primary religion in the kingdoms. Baldur had grew to question Odin's decision to not give humans access to their own mana. He thought it wasn't fair for such an amazing race to be treated as the runts. Odin discerned that his plan was better this way, but like any rebellious son, Baldur went against his father's wishes. He sacrificed half of his mana and gifted it among all the human race. For decades, man then developed their newborn power, being able to augment all physical abilities of themselves, and now create out of nothing. Odin was angry with the actions of his son, and thus a war began. 2 tribes of the old gods broke out, the Aesir and the Vanir. Baldur leading the Vanir, and Odin leading the Aesir. Eventually, the Vanir was nearly wiped out, and thus realigned with the Aesir, but Baldur stayed on his own. His unique ability to not take any damage made him impossible to stop, but he was not powerful enough on his own to defeat the Aesir, so what supplanted was a long stalemate. The gods couldn't kill Baldur because he was impervious, and Baldur couldn't kill the gods because he wasn't strong enough. Constant battles of Thor and Baldur routed the worlds of Ymirgardr. Sadly, man does as man does, and they grew greedy of the new power, wanting more of it. King Alexander rallied the kingdoms of Christia and Muslia under one banner, and the now mana-filled humans could pour energy into their ships, which let them soar across the cosmos. Led by King Alexander and his commanders, they first attacked Jotunheim, successfully defeating the Jotnar, forcing most of them to flee to the outer rim of their quadrant. Meanwhile, several thousands of Jotnar stayed behind to join the army of man, to act as berserkers. The army of man next attacked the dwarves of Nidavellir. Although the dwarves were more powerful in their own rights, they had a disdain and dislike for war, and thus quickly surrendered to man on the condition they craft ships, weapons, and armor for them. Man, now armed with dwarven weapons, and Jotun berserkers invaded the powerful lands of Alfheim. Despite their newfound power, the elves more than held their own. The high elf chieftains were powerful enough to obliterate lines of men with just the wave of a hand. After several months of warring, it was a stalemate, and King Alexander was advised by his commanders to retreat. But thankfully the neutral kingdom of Scandia had sent aid to the alliance, giving them 9 runic rings. The rings multiplied magic power several-fold, while converting their natural magic into more potent dark magic. With these rings, they were able to overpower and take out the elf chieftains, causing a break in the chain of command and the defeat and retreat of the elves to the outer rim. Now man had command of the entire center of the galaxy. The other races forced to live in the hostile outer edge. Days after the success of the Great War of Conquering, though, the gods noticed their grand inner conflict, the grand war between the Aesir and the Vanir, had severe consequences. It shattered the natural order of the universe, increasing the speed of the darkness surrounding them. In hours, the darkness would envelop all of the Amirgarden. In an effort to delay the darkness, Baldur committed a grand sacrifice, crafting a cross out of his only weakness, a lone mistletoe tree in the depths of Jotunheim, the only thing his mother's protection spell could not encompass. Baldur took King Alexander with him to the edge of the galaxy and was nailed to the cross, eyeing the darkness as it quickly approached him like a thundercloud. The mistletoe had weakened Baldur's protective charm, and thus he began to raise his mana to its utmost potential and ordered Alexander to slit open his belly and chest. Alexander emitted a sword of mana and did the deed. Light magic then surrounded the galaxy, acting as a giant sphere of light. Darkness could not get in. But this protection spell was only a delay tactic, not to stop it indefinitely. In the aftermath of Baldur's sacrifice, word spread, and religions supporting the god of light expanded rapidly, taking the light-colored cross as its symbol. Days after the war, a group of high-level knights formed the Knights Brotherhood, a peacekeeping organization with interests of protecting mankind, finding new recruits, and, most importantly, mass converting non-believers and pagans to the worship of the one true God, the God of Light. The slogan of the Knights Brotherhood is, "To recognize your insignificance is empowering. To show sympathy is strength. Those who follow the God's light arrive at enlightenment. Those who are enlightened cannot be doused in darkness." Now, the events of my main story take place 273 years after the great sacrifice of the God of Light, in the year 273 ALD, ALD meaning after Light's death. It starts in a village on a free planet, a world not under the rules and protection of the Kingdom of Christia, nor its now vassal world, Scandia. An orphanage filled with interesting people, mainly Sylar Roar, a boy with immense physical strength and magic power for his age. He, like his mother once was, is the protector of the orphanage and the village. His goal is to one day track down and kill his father, who was a raider. His father had raided the village years ago and took advantage of Sylar's mother, raping her, causing Sylar's existence. The only thing Sylar had of his father was a dirty, rusted ring that he wears as a necklace around his neck. Sylar will eventually abandon his orphan brothers to join the Knights Brotherhood, so he can gain power and can gain connections to track down his father and slay him one day. Rourke Nogardnep is a young, chubby, scared boy who finds out he's the descendant of King Alexander and King Arthur. His older brother, Escanor, sends him off to be a keeper, a neutral organization that builds forts around areas that are corrupted by the leaking darkness that leaks through the light charm protection spell and corrupts areas like lakes, caves, and other areas like that. Escanor leads a rebel group who claims that he, of royal blood, has a true claim to the throne. Then there's Floki, who joins the One-Eyed Wanderer, a cult of powerful wizards whose goal is to discover the secret of the darkness. Now, that's really kind of the world that this takes place in, and then the story of what's going to happen. Now, there's going to be mana and magic, and basically what happens is you use mana to augment your physical abilities. It makes you stronger. You can, shoot beams of mana out of your hands. You can do a lot of stuff with mana. I'm not going to go into a lot, but also, if you are strong enough with mana, you can use mana to create weapons. So, if you have high enough mana, you will be able to just naturally emit a mana sword that you use as your main weapon. And if you have even higher enough mana and magic control, then you can gain access to a second sword, and you can wield two swords at once, but with the additional pro of having a second sword is it gains an additional ability, like maybe a fire sword, a water sword, a sword that lets you teleport, lightning sword, stuff like that. The second sword is very important because it gains an additional ability. But that is really it for my story, guys. Let me know what you think down below. I'm thinking about maybe starting a Patreon for this book, give you guys perks, and I don't know what I do, but because if I get enough money on Patreon, the more I can focus on the book and less on my YouTube videos. Because at the end of the day, I still need to get paid, or else I can't really do YouTube videos because I'm pretty busy with a lot of projects. But anyways, guys, let me know what you think about the lore and the worlds of the Surrounding Darkness. Be honest. Do you like it? Do you dislike it? And of course, that is not the full story. That is also not the 100% true story, just the one I'm giving off for now. But let me know your thoughts down below. Please do leave a like if you enjoyed, comment, and subscribe. Hope you guys all have an amazing day. Plus...